So now we're going to do a little bit something different because there's a lot of questions being asked of who is Action Andretti, who is the guy that caused the upset of the year on AEW Dynamite on Winter is Coming uh, on December the 14th. Well, that's what we are going to look into in this video. Who is Action Andretti? Let's get into it. Action Andretti is a trainee of the MCW Wrestling Academy in Philadelphia, or actually Maryland. MCW Wrestling, formerly known as Maryland Championship Wrestling, has been a a spot for many of the past wrestlers, many legends to go through. You know, the likes of, I believe, off the top of my head, Lita, but but that is aside the point because majority of the time that Action Andretti has been working, he has been in the Philadelphia area with working for companies like CZW, GCW, and Wrestle Pro, but also, of course, spending time with Maryland Championship Wrestling. He has only been in wrestling for 4 years. So he started wrestling at 20 years old because the kid is only 24, which is insane because well, he's still so freaking young that he is still so freaking young that he has a bright future ahead of him. And the fact of the matter is, you gotta wonder what is what does the future hold for Action Andretti and AEW. But to get a little bit of a background, to get a little bit of a background, you also have guys like Orlando Jordan, Lita, Ashante the Adonis, aka from Hit Row, James Ellsworth, Renee Michelle, Ken Dixon, Joey Keys, Dante Caballero have all spent time down in MCW. And for somebody like Action Andretti to get an opportunity on AEW programming to become a bigger star, which by the way, Action Andretti was actually the Shamrock Cup winner, which is a tribute tournament to former independent wrestling standout Shane Shamrock, who passed away years ago, but it is something that MCW does on a yearly basis to dedicate to Shane Shamrock a tournament of sorts. But the sight to see showed why he lived up to his nickname on the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite, defeating the Ocho Chris Jericho after only 4 previous matches in AEW, all on Dark Elevation, and he lost every single one of them, including one to QT Marshall in what was a solid effort from the youngster. But the fact of the matter is, nobody saw this coming, and nobody expected that Action Andretti would be one to defeat Chris Jericho because it came out of nowhere. And I saw the match, I watched the match, and the fact of the matter is, the AEW faithful were 100% invested, 100% behind this superstar, and it is something that AEW struck gold with Action Andretti in this happening because, as I mentioned in a previous news video, this is something that Chris Jericho wanted to do back during the pandemic era with Jungle Boy, but he wanted the crowd to be there, and what we saw at Winter is Coming is the reason why. Action Andretti is somebody that, honestly, I looked up Action Andretti, and there really isn't a lot known about Action Andretti, but Here's a quote taken from a recent appearance on Busted Open Radio. Action Andretti said, "I started training about 4 years ago, and I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't really know the ins and outs of it. Once I got that goal, I started to realize, okay, I can't just wrestle here." Basically, as he started creating more buzz and more buzz and more buzz, before you know, as he started creating more buzz and more buzz and more buzz, he wanted to expand his horizons and go other places and try and get his name, because he was basically, this is what the miss from the quote was, that at first he was only trying to get on MCW shows, but he realized that he needed to expand his spotlight and look elsewhere, and that's when CZW and WrestlePro and Game Changer Wrestling and AEW came a calling. And I don't know honestly what Jericho saw in Action Andretti, but he is a solid person. He seems to know what he does in the ring. He seems to carry himself well in the ring, and it seems to be a perfect choice for AEW, because this is somebody that came from out of nowhere and is someone that honestly, I did a Google search on him, and the only information you get on the Google search is a Twitter and just really reports of what you got from people talking about people talking about um, his win over Chris Jericho on various news sites. And basically, you also have the companies that he works for, like PPW, like PPW, like MCW, CZW, like I mentioned, and talking about his previous matches in those companies. But other than that, he doesn't have a Wikipedia page. The PPW is Pennsylvania Premier Wrestling, but it it is one of the reasons why I felt like I needed to do my best to profile Action Andretti and give you guys a little bit of insight onto who he is. But I didn't realize it would be this difficult to profile Action Andretti. But if you want to give a little bit of a background of where he comes from, a company like Pennsylvania Pro Wrestling has also produced people like Brian Pillman Jr., Preston Vance, Richard Holiday, Sonny Kiss, Casey Navarro, Dan Maff, and talent like AJ Styles and Mick Foley and DDP and Booker T and Al Snow have spent time in PPW or been with PPW at some point, and Jack Swagger. But the fact of the matter is, it is cultivating his name in companies like PPW and MCW and CZW that have brought him to this upper echelon of wrestling and have somehow, some way, given him the opportunity to become a known name on a national scale. And I, for one, have not seen this in a very, very long time, and that's why it has not sunk in yet that Action Andretti is holds a victory over Chris Jericho. And if last night's episode of Dynamite is any indication, the situation with Jericho and Action Andretti is not something that's going to go away anytime soon. And in my opinion, Action Andretti, which again, the Wizard was back on Dynamite, let's put it that way, but I'm not going to spoil the surprise. If this is any indication, then we got a longer, more stretched out thing to come with Action Andretti and the JAS. But in my opinion, Action Andretti needs something else to solidify his run. And outside of that upset victory, because when does the upset victory become a fluke as opposed to an upset? He needs to keep the momentum going and keep that feud going with Jericho and the JAS. And just, I'm excited to see what AEW has planned and what Chris Jericho has planned with Action Andretti in 2023, because Jericho is one of the most bulletproof people in AEW. So if he wants to do a feud with Action Andretti, even where Jericho ends up losing the feud, it is something that could happen and could make Action Andretti a star for AEW in 2023, which is something that they need because they need something positive to end the year on because there has been a lot of negative news in AEW in 2022. So something positive to end the year on would be a good start for AEW. And Action Andretti seems like somebody worth building building the future to. And he seems like a kid with a lot of potential, in my opinion. But this has been my profile on Action Andretti, and I hope that I gave you some news, even if it wasn't that well put together. I did my best with what I had, and there really isn't a lot of information out there on Action Andretti. But I do hope you learned a little bit. And if you did, feel free to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this type of content, because I would love to do more of this in the future. With that being said, I will see you in the next video.